Thanks. You know, it may be because of all the illegal music that is on this laptop.
A lot of LimeWire finds on there.
Oh
Yeah,
God.
a lot of Pirate Bay activity.
A lot of torrents
Are we
going
recording? Oh, this is going in the front. I'm Sean,
I'm Sky.
And I'm Janson.
and this is the Weekly Pop-Up Podcast, a podcast about all things pop culture. And we are happy that you guys are joining us on a very special chain of episodes as we're going to talk about horror movies, scary movies, and all as such for the month of October. So I think this episode is just going to be like a general discussion, a general overview, maybe some of our memorable moments with horror, some of our views.
Just so
Jansen
we're
has some hot
clear,
takes.
the fly from
From
Mike
Mike
Pence
Pence.
last night is on Sean's screen right now. I wanted
House.
to call it out before he went out of frame.
I know.
It's
Continue your intro. I'm sorry. I'm
It's
sorry to
gone.
interrupt you.
It's gone now. No, it's perfect. That's a horror movie-esque
Jeff Goldblum went home.
situation. Um,
It's an omen for how this month is going to go. But explain, because we have a rough outline. I know we're gonna kind of nail it down, but
Yeah.
pretty much the next 3 to 4 weeks we
Up
have an
until-
overall theme.
Yeah, up until Halloween, we're gonna be talking about like I said. So this time, it's just gonna be real general, like a personal conversation about what we like and don't like about horror, some of our memorable moments with horror, just stuff like that. Just
I've
kind of
got 'em.
talking about the genre in the abstract. And then in the next couple episodes, we're gonna kind of like pick apart parts of it, stuff that's like horror adjacent, that's more spooky and dark. The classic like ghost schools, poltergeist, like paranormal horror. Then move on to like slasher and new age horror, stuff like that, and all sorts of things. They'll be titled appropriately, but I know me and Sky are excited, and Jansen is just going to try to hang in there.
I'm a team player. Here for the podcast, and that's all you get from me. And I've got stories, okay? So we'll have stories. That's about all I can guarantee.
Yeah, we'll have stories.
Enthusiasm, it's here. It's here.
Yeah, we got enthusiasm. Go
Yeah.
ahead, Sky.
Well, I do want to. I think it's appropriate that we start off, I guess, by like saying, what was our first big exposure to horror? Like what was the thing that made us recognize we were watching the horror genre? And Jansen, since you love horror so much, I want to know what the first instance.
Honestly, the first one that I remember, which ironically did not scar me because I think I've mentioned it a couple times, but the things that get me are scary faces, demons, ghosts, things I have no chance against. It's logically I can't fight a seance. In a seance, we summon a demon. It's done. It's donezo. You can't do anything about it. So realistic things are much while they are still scary and I'm big on jump scares too and everything, but
Right.
I don't go to bed that night being oh my God, this is gonna haunt me now. But the first one I really remember is Cujo. And now, do we classify that as I don't know if it's a horror movie, but it's definitely a scary movie for sure, right?
Yeah, it's like a monster of the week sort of horror. Yeah.
So Cujo is what I really remember because I distinctly remember it was me, my two brothers, and we had two of our cousins over, and we watched it really late at night. I think my parents were already asleep, and I distinctly remember one cousin was way too young to watch it. We were probably all too young to watch it, but one was he's probably 5, got to be 5 tops. And so freaked out. And then we make it worse because my middle brother tells him, Jonah, there's a guy, look outside right now. Don't look outside right now. There's a guy standing on the road, just watching the house. And that was just a whole nother extra level to scare him. So that's what I distinctly remember that as being kind of my first exposure to horror and being this wasn't the worst thing in the world. Still very scary because that dog is not messing around. But I couldn't tell you the whole plot. All I know is there's a big dog that's trying to eat a child and her mother, who I think is the mother from E.T., if I recall correctly.
Dee Wallace.
Yeah, Dee Wallace, who I follow on Instagram, or we follow each other. I don't know, but
Bring her on the podcast.
I've sent an email at least. I have sent an email. No response yet.
Um, if you mind if I go next,
Yeah,
guy?
go for it. Yeah,
So
please.
I've got kind of like a dueling thing. My mom, big horror fan, big movie fan. Honestly, my whole family was. I think I've said on the podcast before, like our version of family time was like going out to see a movie, going to Blockbuster, picking up movies for the weekend, and just like watching movies all the time. But my mom, big horror fan, and I just have these memories of watching these horror movies in my living room with my dad and my older brother and my mom, and just like my dad making loud noises to scare me, and just during like tense, quiet scenes. So I just like no specific horror movie, but just like that sort of environment. But I remember the first horror movie I ever saw in theaters, which was like a big thing, it was like George A. Romero's like City of the Living Dead or something like that. I can't remember. It was like a continuation of the Living Dead movies, but it was like made in like 2003 or 2004. I can't remember the exact
Land of the
title.
Dead
Land of the
with
Dead. That's right.
John Leguizamo.
Yes, with John Leguizamo. Yeah, Land of the Dead. And I remember being like so pumped and seeing that in theaters because it was like the first horror movie I had seen in theaters. So those are kind of like my two horror movie credentials, I guess.
Now, in a minute, are we also going to bring up like what like scarred us or like
Oh yeah,
really like
we can
drove it
definitely
home? But
we
go
can
ahead,
definitely
Sky. I
get to
want
that. But
Skies to go first. I
let's
just want
get
to make sure.
Sky's kickstart. His
Uh,
earliest horror memory.
my earliest horror memory, the one that I think probably sticks with me the most, is I was over at my aunt's house, and I, they went off and did their own thing, like the parents and the whole big family, and stuff like that. So I would go off to a spare bedroom, and in the spare bedroom they would have like this box TV, with a VCR and just a lot of VHSs everywhere. And I found this one, and I popped it in, and I watched it. This memory will stick with me forever. And it was A Nightmare on Elm Street,
Mm.
and I was probably maybe 5,
Oof.
and
Way
you
too
know,
early, sir. Way too early.
I'm pretty sure I started watching when I was probably 3, but that's the one that really sticks out to me the most. And I watched the whole thing and didn't really have any problems. I don't remember.
What a
There
strong
was
child.
the one movie that really gave me problems, and I guess this can lead into the movie that really scarred people, was The Howling. The Howling was probably the first one to really get to me, I guess, as a kid. I never really slept with a nightlight. That movie made me sleep with a nightlight. And, I guess it was because of the makeup and the practical effects that you see with these things. Like the 80s were all about practical effects and makeup. And that movie did it so impressively that it messed me up, man.
Yeah.
If you're not aware of what it is, it's a werewolf movie.
Yeah.
Okay. Very cool.
Um, so if for me, one of a scarring experience, and this is gonna get real dark, guys. It's not a proud family moment, but the movie Child's Play with Chucky
Oh God, no, man.
creeped me out. An uber I don't My mom has a lot of creepy dolls as it is, right? So the idea that one could come to life and start murdering us was like not okay for me. And I just like my family watched it. It was a movie that I couldn't handle, so I left. My older brother though was interested by how much that it could torment me. My mom had this one doll that was like that had red hair. It didn't look anything like Chucky, but as like a 6, 7 year old, like 5, 6, 7 year old kid, like any red haired doll looked like Chucky.
Any
So
doll,
my brother
bro.
had
Like
any doll, any doll. So my brother had this friend who stayed with us for one summer because it was from another town we used to live in, and they rented Child's Play, and they tied me to my parents' bedpost and put Chucky on and made me watch it. Now, this is where the recollection of a kid and like what really happened kind of get blurry. In my mind,
yeah.
I remember them taping my eyes open because like I don't know why I wouldn't have closed my eyes. Like I remember them forcing my eyes open in some way. I think it was taping. My brother refutes that part of the story. He does agree that he tied me to the bedpost to force me to watch this terrifying movie in the presence of a red-haired doll. But that one, and I to this day I still can't watch like Chucky is like has this power over me because of that scarring experience. Like I still I don't have any interest in seeing the movie at all whatsoever. So that was
None of
my
them? Like, have you watched any of them past the
I
first one?
haven't I haven't gone back, honestly. I mean, I've seen bits and pieces like on
Right.
sci-fi when they would, they'd do horror movies and stuff, but like it's still to this day, it's just like something I don't have interest in because of my traumatic childhood experience.
Okay, but that
That's
like really
hilarious.
takes it to the next level because like you're actually being like tortured.
Yeah.
Like you're also
Yeah.
being like physically tortured as
Yeah,
well as like.
it's a dark, dark time in my family's
And
history.
honestly, as we continue to talk about it, I just like realize how much I don't like horror and yet how many like quote unquote scary things I've seen. Because like I'm thinking I'm like I haven't seen a Child's Play like all the way through because I also don't do that, but it made me think of, and I don't know if you guys watched or remember, but like I will never forget the two Halloween episodes from Boy Meets World and from Family Matters, because what made me think of it is in the Family Matters one, Urkel makes a doll and it comes to life, and like it's
Hmm.
they were both, I don't know if they actually are, but like as a child, like they killed Mr. Feeney in Boy Meets World in that
Yeah,
episode. It was
that's a
off the
fantastic episode.
rails. They were
Yeah.
both off the rails scary as a child because you're TGIF, you're feeling good. You're like, great, cool, like nice Halloween episode. And both like
Hmm.
everyone in Boy Meets World dies, I think, except for Corey. And then
Yeah.
again in Family Matters, like it's like the Chucky story. But what made me so, but that's not what scarred me. I mean, I do remember being very scared, but what scarred me, and I told Sky this, and it's similar to you, Sean, of where like to this day I just don't watch it. And that is The Ring. It was it was everything I don't like. Very memorable, scary faces. And when I say scary faces, let me lay that out for people. Like I've got a very good memory for faces. Like when I see a face, I just remember it. And so when I watch a scary movie and go to bed that night, when I close my eyes, I see the face like in all its glory. So that's what I don't like. I don't like it so much that to this day, like earlier this week, my college roommate texted me about this week's Lovecraft episode on HBO Max and
Mhm.
was like, "Hey man, scary faces in this one." Like just out of the blue, he said, "Hey, just be warned, there are scary faces in this." I said,
Wow.
"Thank you, Guns.
What a
Thank you."
bro.
What
Uh,
a great roommate. So it's The
that's
Ring,
funny.
and I was telling Sky this because even like Scary Movie 3, I think it is, that like makes fun of it. I just
Hmm.
don't watch that. Like I don't watch that part because that girl freaks me out, bro. I know they're making fun. I know that it's funny, and I was watching it a little while, like a couple years ago. I was like, "Great, I like Scary Movie," because like the other ones I like, they're enjoyable, they're funny. But it got to that part, and I was like, I thought I would do better with this, but like I'm feeling a little uneasy because they play the tape and it's got the lighthouse and everything. I'm like, I'm not here for this.
Hmm. It's funny that that's your reasoning for not liking scary movies because it's very similar to my wife's reasoning about scary movies. Like she just she's going to dream about the scary stuff in the movie, and that's just not what she wants.
But anything with like down to earth stuff, like I can watch it. One movie
Right.
that scares like a lot of people is, and I always forget the name of it, and it's always very simple. It's called like and you guys will know it exactly. But it's where the people are at that house, and then the neighbors come over and kill them for like no reason.
Strangers.
Strangers. That freaks out a lot of people, and it really doesn't me. Like, I mean, I don't desire to watch it, but like if it was on right now and you guys were like, let's watch this, I would.
Hmm.
Again, now the one that makes that a little creepy is like I think Sky has mentioned it before. At the end of the film, it says why they did it, and there was like no reason why, which is
Right.
kind of wild. But like when it's something, I'm not saying I would win by any means. I mean, I'm like an overweight dad at this point who probably would very well lose, but at least I'd have a chance.
Right.
Like something like Insidious or The Conjuring or something, no chance, man.
You just
You
want a
lose.
chance in
I
in your
just
horror
want a
movies. Yeah.
chance, man,
Yeah.
and
The
don't have a scary
paranormal. Yeah.
face. Have a
Yeah.
normal face, and we can talk about it.
Yeah. Uh, i- it's interesting. You know, horror is like an evergreen genre, right? Because no matter how many ways you slice it, like it boils down to people being
Slice.
right, people being killed or people being tortured or people being hunted or whatever it is. Like it's just sort of the people on screen versus this, extraordinary evil. And there's probably, I don't know, Sky, you may know better than me. I am out of touch with like more recent horror because, like I said, my wife has no interest in it, and so I just don't get to see. I've got this whole list piling up of like anything past like the Babadook, essentially, because
Good
I
one.
just don't get the chance to see it.
Yeah.
So, but it's just, I mean, 50, 60, 100 movies, horror movies a year, ranging from direct to VOD or all the way up to like huge multi-million dollar successes. So I just it's such a, I don't know, it's an interesting type of film that people continually time. I mean, there's more 16-year-olds every year, right, going to the theater and seeing these movies. So like it's just never ever ever going to die.
I think there was a point in cinema history where horror was on the brink of death, right? I think during the 80s, when we had the big slasher birth, um, with Nightmare on Elm Street, for instance, and Friday the 13th and the Halloween series, we took a departure from horror and Child's Play. We took a departure from horror and we went into comedy. And horror was slowly dying, a really painful death. And for me, the movie that I really appreciate and one of my favorite horror films, if not my favorite, is Scream, directed by Wes Craven. And it really brought back the horror genre. It's still a slasher, but the way that it's meta, it introduced this whole new way of presenting itself. And it really just attracted itself to younger audiences, which is what it needed to do to really further the brand and really revitalize horror. So I think we have that movie to really thank for seeing some of these films that you're not fortunate enough to see right now, Sean, because there's just no time.
Well, I think it's very
Right.
interesting. One credit you have to really give horror that I think others have trouble with is how it does kind of reinvent itself. Or as a person who is just an outsider looking in, I mean, as you talk about, in the 70s or 80s, oh my gosh, we have a special guest. Oh my gosh, his debut.
For
Yeah.
those who are just listening, Sean
Yes,
has brought in a child. Not sure if it is his child, but
I
it
am
is a
pretty sure
child.
it's his child.
Just a baby.
A
Just
very,
found it. The
very.
fly has now transformed
Oh my
into
lord!
a huge, chunky baby.
How
He's
much? How much
very
you weigh these days?
He's 17 pounds. He just came from
Wow.
the doctor.
Sophie just went to the doctor today, and she's like almost 12 pounds.
Yeah,
And
he's a chunky boy.
he's a cutie though.
Yeah.
He's a cutie.
But yeah,
Uh,
Jansen, you're right though. I
sorry.
mean,
It's
horror
okay.
Yes,
It's okay.
horror
Sorry for
had
the
to
distraction.
transform.
it's
No,
transformed, and it's gone from kind of what you typically think of, like you said, the 80s kind of deal, into that comedy. But even more recently, the found footage type deals, the psychological type horror, things of that nature, or even with like on the psychological nature, like Us, kind of pointing us towards the future. Not Us, Get Out. Apologies, maybe Us as well. I haven't seen
yeah,
Us.
no,
Um,
that's for sure.
but like it keeps kind of finding ways to redo it. And when we were talking with Jed, he had even said, as Sean said, you're kind of confined. There's only so many quote unquote overarching things you can do. You can be like hunted, you can slash, you can chase after someone, whatever it is. But Jed was talking about, he did some kind of psychological prison seance horror. Like, you can still think of things that are way out of the box that still get you to a place you've never been, which I think is something that's hard to do, because I think one genre you see that's doing dying is like a rom-com. Those like don't those aren't like big like that, mid
Right.
90s, early 2000s. I mean, how many rom-coms are on like big screens these days? It's
Right.
superhero movies, it's things. So like they've got to figure out something to do, to reinvent themselves, I think.
Well, what horror has really leaned into smartly is that they have to have a theme. They're driven by themes now. They're not driven by how many gruesome kills can we have. Saw played that out to death. Even though that one had a
Great
theme as
movies.
well.
Great movies.
I like the first one. I'll give you that. The rest of them became torture porn, which is fine if you like
I
that kind
was
of
there
stuff.
for the overall backstory. What's going on with this guy?
That's
Where,
cool. Didn't he
Why
die
is
like
he doing
5 times?
why is he doing this?
Right.
Yeah, he had like cancer once, and then it was like, his girl that was doing.
But we have horror right now, and you mentioned Lovecraft Country. They are driven by social commentary right now, and it is something that people can really attach themselves to, and it's something that can be relatable. Which is why, I love Haunting of Hill House, and I'm excited because I know that this comes out, tomorrow, Friday. The Haunting of Bly Manor, which I am really excited for. And it's because horror is blending itself with drama right now. Like we are seeing that blend. It's not just horror thriller anymore. It really is like it's broadening and it's expanding so that it can reach more audience.
Well,
And oh, go ahead, Janson. I was just saying, I'm glad you brought kind of that social commentary stuff up because um, I was talking to you guys before about how in college I took a horror movie class, and I don't want to be all like, in college, I learned that the deeper meaning. Um, but the reason I, took that class wasn't just to watch, horror movies or kind of get like a history of horror, but because there are some interesting, like deeper latent meanings in horror. Like when you think about slasher films, right? The main target of slasher films, not just in terms of who are going to see them, but the people actually getting killed on screen are teenagers. And in Scream, as this guy brought up, there are these rules of horror movies, right? Like you can't have sex, and you can't split. You can't say "I'll be right back." But the sex thing is like super interesting because it is kind of true. Like these teens are having sex. They're in compromising positions in Halloween, like one of the very first slasher films, and they're getting killed during these like intimate moments. And you can look if you go just a layer deeper past like the gruesome stabbings or the neck breaks or the getting tossed off buildings, whatever it is. If you just go one layer deeper, then you realize like the you know being a teenager moving on to the next stage of your life, there's this death of innocence, right? And part of that is like losing your virginity. So then the killer becomes this whole symbolism for the innocence dying in you, right? And the only way to beat him is to continue the innocence as long as you can. And so I think horror people, obviously there are groups of people who go for the killings and the slashings, but they've always kind of had this like undercurrent of themes and Halloween came out in the 70s, like right at the end of the sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Like it's always kind of reacting to the moment, and the ones that get the biggest and the brightest are always the ones that have just like a little bit more to it than someone getting split in half by a giant machete. It's just
Yeah.
and it's just such an interesting thing. Like why do people go watch them? Like why do we enjoy the thrill of being scared and being frightened? And what are we even? It's not like a historical drama or an emotional drama where we're learning something about ourselves, but in a way we do learn something. There is a meaning we're getting even if we're not really understanding of it at the time.
well,
Right.
Abe Lincoln Vampire Hunter was definitely a historical drama, so I would combat you on that.
Historical drama horror.
um, I remember listening to a podcast that I think they had watched they had recently watched an awful, like intentionally so awful, like 70s, early 70s, middle 70s horror movie that was just like the worst thing they've ever seen. But they were talking to somebody and they said, when horror really kind of was in its, slasher kind of heyday, the the formula was, let's give them some scares, let's give them some sex, and like send them home happy. Because like it's teenagers that are watching it, they want to see some sex, they want to see some scares, and then they want to go back home and keep living their lives. And I just think that, as Sky mentioned, it's gotten so much more deep and thoughtful. And every week I watch Lovecraft Country, I have no idea what's happening, and I don't even know if I like it. And yet every Monday I sit in my office on my lunch break and I'm like, all right, let's cue it up. Let's see what happens. And not all of Lovecraft is horror, but like this last episode definitely was. But I mean, you can say that about a lot, like Get Out, for example, as we were talking about.
Yeah.
So much so many subliminal things that are meant to be read by the audience that are like less subliminal than even Sean was talking about, but all the social commentary and how it is. And I think if it keeps playing on that, you've got a long way to go. I haven't seen it, but Antebellum seems like it's a similar kind of theme where it's a social kind of commentary or has those aspects in it. The one with Janelle Monáe that came out recently. I think it came out, right?
Yeah.
I know it didn't make it like to theaters, obviously, but
Right.
I think that it came out on Amazon or something like that, or Apple
Yeah.
TV.
I think it was Apple TV.
So I think if they keep pushing the boundaries like that, you will find people who, like me, who are willing to almost like sit through some of that to see the social commentary, like just to I'll deal with the horror because I want to see like what's the story you're telling.
Hmm.
But what's
Hmm.
interesting is, I mean, Sean, you mentioned it, but we started off in psychological horror. Like if you think about it, you go all the way back to like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, came out in
Hmm.
1920. That film
Hmm.
is about madness. The
Yep.
theme is madness. But then, skyrocket over to the Hollywood New Wave, and we get people like Toby Hooper, we get people like John Carpenter who bring in this new form of horror,
Oh,
which is
I've
like,
seen The Birds before. I've seen that before
well, yeah, I mean Alfred
with
Hitchcock,
Hitchcock. Yes, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean Hitchcock too. I think he was like probably the first one to really experiment with the slasher with Psycho,
Hmm.
and he
Hmm.
was the first one to introduce that trope of, oh, you saw this person's shoulder, you saw this person naked in the shower, they're gonna die.
Yeah.
But then you get to the slasher, and then you had like the monster horror in between. We don't really talk about monster horror anymore, or sci-fi horror. We don't really see that too much. And
Right.
now psychological horror. And I'm thinking that all of this comes in waves. Where are we going next? Are we going back to slasher? Because right now we're in spiritual and psychological. Spiritual, I think, will
Yep.
always be there. I don't think spiritual will ever leave.
Come on, man.
Psychological, I am wondering if we lose psychological within the next 10 years.
We gotta lose spiritual. Keep
Don't think it'll ever
psychological.
happen.
But
People are too
Yeah.
religious. People are
this
too
brings
religious.
up actually we had a listener who had a question, and he was going to come on, but he was going to come on yesterday, had some commitments, but he did want me to ask at least you, Sky, I'm sure you as well, Sean, but he said you should bring up kind of the difference and ask them about the difference between the old school directors and the new age horror directors like Jordan Peele, Mike Flanagan, and James Wan. And just kind of your thoughts on that. And we might have already discussed it, but we do like to engage the viewers. What do you guys think about the old age versus the new age? As you said, like John Carpenter versus like kind of where we are now.
Sean, if you want to do it, you can.
Yeah. So when you think about like Hooper and Craven and Carpenter, they were people who knew their audience. Not that the new wave don't, but like we said before, they knew that these movies by and large are consumed by teens on a Friday night at the drive-in, whatever. So like they crafted these entire scares around that. And Nightmare on Elm Street, that's why all those slasher films are about these kids or young people, young vibrant people. And it has a lot, and they have a lot of, I guess, like classical sort of storytelling, right? You get a very brief, like, here are the people, here's 20 minutes of the movie where here, meet the counselors, meet the people, try to latch on to, they usually have about 6 or 7, right? So you try to get somebody to latch on to someone, whether it's the lead or this guy or that
The
guy, like
popular girl or the jock
whoever
or
it is,
the
right? Like there are all those tropes, and you latch onto them, and then you watch them die. Now you can watch times you're happy that they're dead because they're the jerk or they're the mean girl, whoever it is. You're happy that they're dead, but sometimes you're like, oh my god, that's me. And it's all about these moments where the monster or whoever it is, the killer, is un unassailable, right? There's nothing that these people are going to do to stop him. He it can be he's never in a rush, he's never in a hurry, no matter how fast or how scared or how, frantic the victims are moving. He's just like a chugging along, or she is a chugging along force, or even in like the paranormal stuff like Poltergeist, like the horror side is always there, and you're just watching these people suffer. And I think with the new age stuff, what's been really interesting is how aware they are of how well that stuff works, and not being so bogged down and paying homage to that, but by kind of elevating that. Like The Conjuring by James Wan is a fantastic, not just horror movie, but just film in general. And it has all these pieces of movies like The Exorcist that came before it, but it's still so like fresh and so new. And like the way that they can build tension now in these quiet, silent moments is just incredible. And I'm not saying they didn't do that back then, but it just, movies were slower back then, and it just nowadays we're more accustomed to like these fast-paced movies. And so when they slow it down and you see a shot of a hallway and you see a character slowly making their way through the hallway and like slowly turning around, that builds tension because we're accustomed to something else. And that kind of wasn't the way it was back in the 70s and the 80s when movies were kind of slower paced anyways, so they really had to get you with a jump scare or with a gruesome murder. And now I would say that horror is most terrifying when nothing is happening because you're expecting what's happening next.
Oh man, when
And
they're walking down that hall, I just kind of,
I'm getting goosebumps now just
yeah.
thinking about like
I've
just
I've seen The Conjuring.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I think you're spot on, man. I do. I think you know, with the exception of maybe Rosemary's Baby and The Exorcist by William Friedkin, there wasn't really a lot of character connection, right? Like we cared about Laurie Strode at Halloween. Like, she was our focal character, but the rest of these slasher films, and we cared about Nancy in the first Nightmare on Elm Street, but like
Mhm.
for the most part, we didn't really care about characters. And what's happening now is we are focusing on characters and we are focusing on whatever is going on in their lives. Ari Aster, he's doing such a phenomenal job with Hereditary and Midsommar. Flanagan, he's doing a great job with Haunting of Hill House. He is all about those character connections and uh, putting the horror onto something internal versus something that's external, which is the things that they did back in the day. With the Babadook by Jennifer I can't remember her, Jennifer Kent. She spoiler, if you haven't seen the Babadook, please see the Babadook. It's
It's
amazing.
great.
Here we go. They materialize grief. Like it's this woman's grief has become this manifestation of this awful monster. And that is something that like Jordan Peele has done, with social commentary. And it's about relating things that are familiar to us and relatable and having us connect with character versus, what it was doing in the past, which really didn't do that.
Speaking of those silent moments, Sean, have you seen Dead Silence?
Um,
Another James Wan film.
Is
I
it James
think
Wan?
so.
It is.
It's
I
those
think I
little
have seen
figure.
that.
It's
Yeah.
like with little dolls and figurines. So I didn't know if Sean
Mm-hmm,
had watched that.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I
With
have seen it
New
actually.
Kids
Now
on the
that
Block.
yeah.
Very,
Um,
very scary for me.
I,
I mean, I
I
don't know if it's actually, but it was scary to me.
I do just want to make one more point. I think the directors now care a little bit more about what happens with the name of the franchise than a Wes Craven, or like back then. uh, You can really count like the first two or three Friday the 13th or the first two Nightmare on Elm Streets before the making money aspect took over the creative purpose of the films. Like, because you start getting into, there's what, 12 Halloweens now,
A
and
lot.
there's 12 Jason movies, and 7 or 8 Nightmare on Elm Streets. So I think now there's a lot more conscious effort at preserving like The Conjuring, even though there's been The Conjuring and The Conjuring 2 and the Annabelle series. Like James Wan seems a little more careful about what he puts The Conjuring's name on than maybe, and a lot of that has to do with studios, right? Like they signed over the naming rights, so they're just getting the check. It says produced by Wes Craven, but is he really involved in it? Just sort of stuff like that. So I think that's something different. That it's a more thoughtful like horror empire than it was before, because it kind of just turned into like a money-making machine that allowed, Wes Craven to come back and make Scream and make other
Right.
films. But I just think that's kind of an important difference as well.
The Conjuring kind of created this cinematic universe, which I guess Insidious did it first, right? Like James
Hmm.
Wan, he created this universe,
Did he
which
make both of those?
yeah,
He did. He
Insidious
made the
1,
first.
Insidious 2, and Conjuring 1 and 2.
What is
And
wrong with him?
Saw. And Saw. He did Saw.
What?
That's
He
how
did
he got
Saw
his
1.
start.
He's done
Um,
Saw, Insidious, and The Conjuring,
and Dead Silence. And this
and
movie
Dead
called
Silence.
Death Sentence with Kevin Bacon. Did you guys ever see that?
No, but that is
Kevin,
insane.
Yes. Is
yeah.
that where his son and his wife are like murdered, and he
Yeah.
goes on like a revenge spree?
Yeah.
That's a good movie.
What
It's
a
a good
run that
movie.
is, though. What a directorial run, or
Mm.
creative run, I guess, in general.
He really has solidified himself as being a master of horror, which, when he signed on to do Fast 9 and Aquaman, I was so upset. I was like, what are you doing? This is your niche, but he's doing great. He's
Mhm.
still killing it on every project he does.
Well, he's supposed to make the second Aquaman a little
Mhm.
darker, isn't he?
Mm.
From what I hear.
Maybe.
Yeah. Well, I do kind of want to talk about how horror is so easily the difference between like a thriller and a horror movie is razor thin, right? Like everybody can make that understanding, but I think the difference between like even a comedy and a horror movie can be super thin. When you look at a movie like, Cabin in the Woods or even Scream, there there's so much the same about what makes comedy work and what makes horror work, that it's all about these tension of expectations, but in one it's the expectation of something and it gets subverted and you laugh, and the other there's the expectation of something and it gets subverted and you're fearful. So like I think that's really interesting, and I think that's why we see someone like Jordan Peele, who had this tremendous sketch comedy career, come out, and now he's like doing the Twilight Zone, he's doing you know Us, and Get
Get out.
Out, like doing all those, and
Yeah.
uh, how you see James Wan move so easily to like action movies, because that again, it's all about building tension, and I don't know, I think it's super interesting.
Well, I have a question for you too, real fast. And Jansen, weigh in. Is a thriller a horror film? Is thriller and horror, are they the same? Is Silence of the Lambs a horror film?
Well,
I don't.
that one I feel like is definitely that one. You'd definitely be bordering, and I feel like many are bordering, but I feel like no, they're not the same. I think they're very close in many cases, and like I mean, Silence of the Lambs, when he's cutting like people's faces off, I mean that get to a certain point, and is it
Is The
thriller?
Strangers? Is The Strangers a horror film, or is it a
I was going to
thriller?
bring that up earlier. Yeah, I don't know if that's. I I think it's sort of a square
What
rectangle
would you say a
situation.
straight up thriller would be? That would like that wouldn't be almost horror. Like if you had to pick one right now.
So, something that is a thriller is something that doesn't have supernatural elements, right?
Okay.
If it can be explained,
So okay.
grounded, then it
Okay.
is a thriller.
So like The Purge.
Yeah,
Perfect.
Is that a thriller?
that can be explained.
I
There's
can
no
watch that though.
supernatural
Like I
elements to
watched
it.
that. Like I have watched the Purge movies.
So you can watch thrillers because the thing that freaks you out is spiritual stuff,
It's
right?
so
Things that
spiritual,
can't
bro.
be the things that
It
can't be
is.
explained.
It
That's
is.
the stuff that
Yes.
freaks you
Like
out.
I've watched as I said every Saw movie. I don't like I like the background story, but again, there's nothing like overarching supernatural. I mean, somebody's gone off his rocker, but
But that
someone's
could happen.
someone's really off. But in theory, that could happen.
Right.
And granted, don't get me wrong. In theory, like we could be haunted, and I just don't want to even touch that. That's what I'm saying. But I get what you're saying. Grounded. I mean, I don't see them as the same, but maybe that's because I view horror as something with like the supernatural element. Like I haven't seen Scream all the way through, but is that a thriller? Like it seems pretty plausible to me. What happens? Correct?
See, and that's the thing, right? I think it really is up to personal definition. I think that plays a lot because for me, I would associate Scream as being a horror film.
Mm-hmm. I
I
would.
would but I know, the technical definition is that it isn't. It is a thriller. But for me, it still resonates as being a
Yeah.
horror film because it is horrific.
Right. I to I think to me, and this is just my personal opinion, I've always seen it as like a, you know, not all rectangles are squares, but all squares are rectangles. Like not all thrillers are horror movies, right? But I think all horror movies are thrillers in a way because whether it's grounded in the natural and it's a person doing it or whatever, or it's a monster ghoul supernatural, I think there is an aspect that in just the in layman's terms that is thrilling to watch. Like the stakes of it are life and death, and I think that's what makes it a thriller. Like life and death stakes, anything with life and death stakes is a thriller, and that boils all the way down to like a movie like Poseidon or like a disaster movie. Like I think those are thrillers, but they're like action thrillers. And I
Yeah.
think movies like Seven are, even though they're dark and have, or even Silence of the Lambs, those aren't like horror thrillers. They're more like mystery thrillers or detective thrillers or something like that.
Okay,
Um,
here's one for you.
okay,
Here's a on the line. What about The Ruins,
The Ruins.
which I have also seen? See, I feel like I've seen more than I feel like I get credit for.
That I think
There's
is
a
a
little
movie.
supernatural in there.
They go down to like South America.
They
And
go down to
they're
South
veins, like
America,
vines growing out of
and
them.
the vines like kind of take over.
Yeah,
But
Way to
like,
bring back a movie that no one has thought about in 12 years.
yeah, yeah.
I think about it more often than I don't know. I just think about it
That's
sometimes.
interesting.
Like, oh.
I have not thought. I mean,
I
I've
enjoy
seen
it.
it.
I enjoy the movie. I'm
Yeah.
like, this is. I'm like in. I'm watching. I'm like, what's
Mhm.
happening here?
I mean, I've seen it.
Yeah,
I've seen it, and I haven't seen it since. So many of my
2008. 2008.
yeah. I was just about to say, like, so many of the movies that I like know are because at my parents' house they were on HBO like for a month straight, or they were on TBS for like every third week of every month for 6 years. And horror movies, like one of my favorite traditions, and again I don't do this much anymore because my wife doesn't like horror movies, is I used to watch the Zack Snyder Dawn of the Dead every Halloween because it's just so good and it gets me
So
in the
much
mood
fun.
and it's so fun. Like after trick or
Mood.
treating,
Get you in the mood for what, Sean?
for whatever happens the day after Halloween. It's just a good. And again, I know I keep coming back to this, but like I think I've always been so intrigued by like why do I, because I'm not sitting through a horror movie stone faced. I'm not sitting through a horror movie with like no emotional affect, or like I get scared at certain points, I get creeped out at certain points. I think one of the movies that creeped me out the most after watching it for whatever reason was Cabin in the Woods. Like when I went to Target after seeing Cabin in the Woods, I just had this like uncomfortable, like, ugh, like I don't, that movie wasn't even that scary, but like something about it has this like shake on me, and I love it, but I also like, but why do I love it? What brings me to these movies over and over again when I could just be like, I'm not interested, but I'm interested.
Do you think with Cabin in the Woods, it's one of my favorites as well, but do you think it was the government, having this like watchdog eye, because like
hmm
that's the only thing I can kind of relate to you going into a Target and being like, Cabin in the Woods,
Right,
they're
exactly,
watching.
and yeah, exactly. I just felt like at any moment, something could come around the corner, and it again, it wasn't a movie that was necessarily scary, right?
Right.
Like, I
It's
wouldn't even.
funny. It's a
It's
really
it's
funny
quite
movie.
funny. Like, it completely subverted my expectations when I went to see it. Like, I knew that I loved the people in it. I knew that there was a twist on horror going in. That's part of the reason I went to watch it. But like, I didn't expect that, and I loved every minute of it. It was a really good movie.
Well, it really does like mess with your expectations from the very beginning. You're having two characters ride around on a golf cart talking about baby-proofing cabinets for 5 minutes.
hmm
You know,
Woo!
and
Woo! Shout out
there's nothing.
dads.
There's nothing to do with the movie itself. And
Yeah.
then 20 minutes in, you really get into the horror of it.
So before we go or move on or whatever is next, I just want to make sure to get this in because we promised we would on our Facebook page, the Weekly Pop-Up Podcast. We told folks that this was what we were recording this week about horror. And so we asked people what their favorite horror movie was or least favorite. And Amanda commented and she said The Thing was her favorite movie.
That's a good one.
And Corey commented and he said Event Horizon or Evil Dead 2. It's difficult to choose some days.
Those are good too.
So I just wanted to make sure. And of course, if you want to reach out to us, the Weekly Pop-Up Podcast on Facebook is where we're at. But we always appreciate any interaction like that. I think people similar to you, Sky, and you, Sean, really enjoy the month of October for the scary, spooky stuff. What also kind of plays not in my favor is my birthday is exactly a week before Halloween. So I always had like costume parties growing up and things like that, that was fine. But it's always like, no, very rarely is there like, I don't know, some other than horror movies, October is not your month, so it's not like for my birthday I was like, let's all go to the movie theater and watch a movie because I wasn't going to watch those.
Well, let's talk about non-horror films then real fast. Let's talk about movies that do exist within the month of October that people typically watch, like Hocus Pocus, the Addams Family one, and Addams Family Values. Casper. Did those films...
I love actually, I told my wife this the other day. We were talking because we were having a debate about, because she said, oh yeah, that's where either she said that's where I first saw Hilary Duff, or that's like she loves Hilary Duff and Casper. And I said, well, that's not like, I said, that
Hilary
is
Duff
Casper.
was in Casper?
She's in a version of Casper, yeah.
Okay,
because
I knew Christina Ricci was in the original.
And that's the version that I know.
Okay.
And that's also, is it Bill Pullman? Is that him?
Yeah, Bill Pullman's in it. And Devin
I always
Salia.
get Bill Pullman confused with the guy from, and this might also be Bill Pullman,
Bill
but
Paxton.
Bill Paxton, yeah, exactly.
One of them is dead. I'm
one of them's dead.
Paxton,
yeah.
dead,
But
yeah.
Bill Pullman is he's in Casper the Friendly Ghost, I believe is the actual name of it. But I actually really enjoyed that one. We had it on VHS growing up, so like it didn't have to be October. We would just watch it whenever.
Right.
But I really enjoyed it because there's a lot of good comedy in it. Again, I haven't seen it in probably 15 years, so if it's actually not good comedy, please don't judge me too hard. But as a child, it was really fun. It had a lot of heart to it because like she really likes it. The Hilary Duff version was also pretty good, actually. I remember being like, oh, I wish I'd seen this version more, but that wasn't the Casper that like I grew up with. But I really enjoyed Casper. I'm not a huge Hocus Pocus guy. A lot of people love it right now. Actually, I just saw a news story out of where I used to live up in Virginia, in Page County, Virginia. They were supposed to have like a drive-in, and like the city council or the town council like banned it from happening. They were like, no, we're not going to do this because it was like too outrageous. Edgy. I mean,
It's a messed up movie.
I don't watch it all the time, but like I don't recall it being like awful enough for like a town to take action on. Just don't go see it.
Small towns, man, they're weird sometimes.
They are.
Sean, what about you? Did you do you gravitate towards a movie that's not really a horror but a Halloween?
I don't think so. Like, I mean, I like Hocus Pocus. I don't think I can give an accurate opinion on Casper because it's been like what 15 18 years since I've actually sat down to watch it, but like I'm racking my brain to think of one that
your
like.
New favorite's about to be Hubie Halloween on Netflix, isn't it?
With
Adam
the
Sandler?
Adam Sandler movie.
I'm pretty excited.
It's gotten pretty good reviews, I've heard.
I don't want to skip over actually, which is my favorite that just came to mind. DCOM original Halloween Town, baby.
Halloween Town. Nice.
Halloween Town 2, Calabash's Revenge, maybe is the name of it, or I'll look it up real quick, but it's something like that.
That's funny.
That's funny.
But yeah, I just I don't know. I don't think so. I think I'm more like, I think my favorite kind of Halloween movie would be a horror movie.
Yeah.
Or a scary movie.
Calabar's Revenge. I'm so sorry. The third one really falls off, but 1 and 2, those are money, right?
1 and 2 are solid.
Yeah, I would recommend.
Okay.
I think non-horror for me, I think I try to watch Addams Family every year if I can because I
That
really
seems
enjoy
up your
that.
alley. I feel like
And Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown is kind of like
Yeah.
a go-to for me. But other than that, it's all straight up real
We've hit
horror.
Janson's stride here in the the last 5 minutes of the podcast.
Mention Charlie Brown, he's all over it.
mention Charlie Brown, baby. Only 3 more weeks of this.
That's the kind of face you want to go to bed seeing. Charlie
That's right,
Brown.
Charlie Brown. I used to play him in every Christmas play. So me and him go
That's
way back.
funny.
All right. Well, I think that kind of wraps it up. I think next week we're going to talk about kind of get more into that horror thriller, like that thin line of horror adjacent movies, maybe movies that are just kind of spooky or scary but aren't exactly horror. But is there anything else you guys want to say?
Just get our plugs in, bro.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, like Janson mentioned, we are now on Facebook and YouTube. You can find us at the Weekly
We're
Pop-Up
videoing this
Podcast.
right now, bro.
You'll see this. Maybe
As
you're
you
watching me
speak.
say this on YouTube.
So
Maybe
meta.
YouTube, so wait, maybe YouTube is like here, right? No,
Bro, I
here?
think
One of
I've
these
almost
two?
figured out how to even put like that little thing at the end that says like, click here for next video.
Right.
Or like click here for subscribe, whatever it is.
In one of these directions is YouTube. But you can find us on Facebook, The Weekly Pop-Up Podcast. You can find us on Twitter at Weekly Pop-Up Podcast. Even hit us up with the Gmail, which is The Weekly Pop-Up Podcast
There's
at
no
gmail.
the. You say
There's no
the
the.
every time. There's no
I say
the.
the every time. It's just Weekly Pop-Up Podcast at gmail.com. Let us know what's your favorite horror movie. What's your favorite non-horror scary movie? Because that's what we'll be talking about next week. And
Rate us.
Shaun of the
Subscribe.
Dead. Shaun of the
Shaun
Dead.
of the Dead. Perfect. Scary movie could even be in that conversation. Yeah.
Rate,
So,
subscribe, wherever
do
you
all
find
that.
us.
Do subscribe, rate, like. Now we got to say that. Share our page. Subscribe again to our YouTube.
We're beggars, and beggars can't be choosers. Whatever you want to do, audience, it's fine.
Yeah, and whatever you want to do. And
Also,
ahead.
real fast, if you do, please comment what movie Janson should watch during this month.
Yeah.
You know,
I think at least next week we'll all come with our favorite kind of like scary adjacent movie. And then the week after that, we're going to start making Jansen watch either a viewer suggestion or me and Sky will give him something to watch so he can come in and discuss like a good slasher movie or a good paranormal, unfortunately, Jansen.
it has to be paranormal.
Why does it have to be paranormal?
Yeah. I don't know how you do with Evil Dead, but I feel like you'd be okay. It is kind of paranormal, but it's not that
I've
bad.
never seen it, so it'd probably be a good one.
The second one's hilarious. It is all comedy.
Sean, you're gonna have to clip just this part so you can put it like on Facebook, so you can share out just this call.
We'll
call
just
to
share
action
this
here.
Yeah, this call to action. Let's get Jansen. Hashtag Jansen gets Halloweened.
Until he shows the degrees. Until he shows the degrees.
Hashtag release the degrees. Hashtag Jansen gets Halloweened. All right. Well, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and we will be back in your earlobe soon.